You're listening to CherryPickin Entertainment.
Throw me the ball and watch what I do with it.
You are now tuned into the CherryPickin podcast with your host, Andre Cherry.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the CherryPickin podcast. Week 10 of the college football season is coming right at you, and we've got a big game this weekend. LSU versus Alabama. Number 13th ranked LSU facing number 8 Alabama. LSU travels to Tuscaloosa this weekend for that matchup. It's a big-time game in the SEC between these two powerhouse schools. These teams have gone 2-2 over the last 4 years, and this matchup has some real big-time implications to the standings in the SEC West, as Alabama currently sits atop the division above Ole Miss and LSU, and last season, LSU beat Alabama by 1 point in an overtime victory. That win helped first-year LSU head coach Brian Kelly win the division. And so this is a big-time game. This has some real implications to the standings, and it's a real opportunity for both of these schools to solidify themselves in the SEC West. Alabama, if they can get the victory over LSU, they pretty much take LSU out of the equation, I feel like, the rest of the way this season. And if LSU can get that victory over Alabama, they make things really tight, really competitive in the SEC West. A couple of things stand out about LSU this season. The Tigers currently rank number 1 overall in scoring and 3rd in passing yardage. Wide receiver Malik Neighbors currently leads all receivers in FBS with 981 yards on 56 receptions and 9 touchdowns. LSU and Bama will both be coming into this matchup this week, coming off of byes from the previous week. They didn't play in week 9. LSU did play in week 8, and they handled Army pretty good back at home by a score of 62-0. And Bama is also coming off of a victory, an impressive one over Tennessee in week 8, in which Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe went 14 of 21 for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. And I believe he is really going to need to play a damn near perfect game this Saturday against LSU in order to beat the Tigers. I want to see how that O-line handles and holds up. It's a blessing that Milroe has the ability to be a dual threat. He can scramble when he needs to. He can get out of the pocket because LSU is coming this weekend. And I believe Bama may be favored by like 2 or 3 points right now. But I still think that LSU has the ability to score points and score points in a hurry. And I know Alabama's defense will be up for the test, but can the offense of Alabama respond this weekend in a way that it needs to in order to beat a high-powered offense? That is going to be the huge test, and that's going to be a huge question this weekend. If Jalen Milroe can play perfect, I think Alabama wins this game. I think LSU is hungry, certainly. They have a loss to Ole Miss earlier in the season, so they really need this victory against Alabama to stay competitive, and I think they could get it. I really do. Even though they're playing in Tuscaloosa, I think this is going to be a really fun game this weekend, and I really can't wait to watch it. College Game Day will also be in Tuscaloosa. I say also, I mean, they will be in Tuscaloosa. I will be in Philly, but College Game Day will be out there for this Saturday matchup. It's a big-time game. Again, it has SEC implications on the line, but also national championships, national college football playoff aspirations on the line for both of these teams as well. So that's a big-time game this weekend in Week 10. After this break, I will tell you some of the other games coming up this weekend, and I'll give you my top 5 locks, and then we'll wrap this episode up with a pretty little bow. So don't go anywhere. The CherryPickin podcast will be right back.
Want to know what life is really like after the game is all over? Real athletes are here to share their true stories of adversity and triumph every week on After Orange Slices. Even if you don't like sports, pro athletes, former college stars, celebrities, coaches, public speakers, doctors, and all kinds of experts join the show, and there's a little bit of something for everybody. Join me, Bridget, for a slice of inspiration, plus your everyday sports news sprinkled in. New episodes every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, available anywhere you get your podcasts.
Basketball is back. And with that comes joy, tension, heartbreak, buzzer beaters, and elation. It's time to be courtside for every one of those moments, no matter where your team is playing. Short Court specializes in making replica and custom basketball courts for your home, office, sports cave to decorate your walls with all those memories. If you have a picture, we can recreate it. Featured in the 2021 UniWatch Holiday Gift Guide, short courts are made using real wood. We frame and give them an epoxy finish to protect the new centerpiece of your memorabilia collection. With previous customers including Northern Kentucky University, Southern Utah University, 199 Apparel, The Perimeter Podcast with Adam Morrison, and many more celebrating the careers and retirements of their coaches, it's time you visit shortcourts.com for more info and a gallery of our work, or you can send us an email, info@shortcourts.com. Be sure to find us on social media, just search for Short Courts. It's time to bring the home court home.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now I'm going to give you my top 5 straight up locks for Week 10 action within the Power 5 conferences, and we'll kick this off in the ACC. I'm taking Notre Dame over Clemson. Last week, if you listened to my episode, I begrudgingly picked Clemson to beat my beloved NC State Wolfpack, but NC State had other plans, and they surprised me and the rest of the world, and they pulled off the victory. Tigers quarterback Cade Klubnik did not have his best performance last week, as the signal caller went 33 for 50 for 263 yards, which is okay, but he had no touchdowns, and he did have 2 interceptions, so that's a no-no. His safety blanket, running back Will Shipley, was knocked out of the game early with an upper body injury, so NC State took full advantage of that, and in the game, Wolfpack wide receiver Kevin Concepcion looked like an All-American on Saturday, as the freshman accounted for 134 total yards and 2 touchdowns. And on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Peyton Wilson had a huge day for the Wolfpack. 8 tackles, 1.5 tackle for losses, 1 interception, which he returned for a defensive touchdown. So it took a full effort for NC State to pull off the victory, and they did it. I was very surprised, very pleased. Head coach Dave Doeren for the Wolfpack had some pointed comments directed towards former Carolina Panthers great Steve Smith Sr., in which he told the studio after the game that NC State isn't a basketball school and that Steve Smith should kiss his ass. It was a very odd exchange. Some of these coaches get in their feelings too much, and if you believe that coaches aren't, reading the newspapers or listening to some of these programs or listening to this podcast, maybe we have a couple college football coaches listening to this podcast, but they listen to everything. They take it all in. They kind of use that for their team they use it as fuel for their team to come out and play a certain way, or they're very sensitive, basically what I'm trying to say here. And that comment by Steve Smith on College Game Day this past weekend really ticked Dave Doeren off, and he brought it up. It ticked him off so much that he brought it up on a telecast that wasn't even ESPN. I watched the game on CW. I didn't even know CW aired college football games. I don't know if that's a new thing or what, but it wasn't ESPN, and so he made that comment post-game. I was watching it live. I thought it was very, very odd. He said what he said, and then he walked off the field. And great win for Dave Doeren. I mean, he got his 77th win at NC State. It's crazy that he's been there that long. He has the opportunity to be the all-time winningest coach in NC State history, which I have mixed feelings about. It's great that he's brought consistency to the program, but I would hope during that time NC State could have achieved higher heights, reached larger levels, larger goals for the program, instead of just consistently going to bowl games, middle tier bowl games. But maybe there's something that he can do next season to kind of turn that program around and get some life into it. But a win is a win. And this is not even about NC State, so I don't know why I'm going on this tangent, but I just thought it was really interesting how that game went last week. Clemson seems to be a shell of its former self. Dabo just seems like he's hanging on, and maybe that's too harsh. I'm not trying to hint that maybe he needs to look elsewhere or go somewhere else or figure it out, not on the Clemson sideline, but that program just looks very different, and it's just like, man, where's the fight? And Clemson was so dominant for so long, but times have changed, and certainly glad that NC State could get a victory over Clemson. If we take a look at this matchup, Notre Dame has really been rolling in its last two games. They've outscored its opponents 106-27 points, which includes a dominant performance against then-ranked number 10 USC. There hasn't been a two-loss team to make the playoffs this season, but Notre Dame is on the fringe. They're on the cusp. And if it were to ever happen, I think Notre Dame is playing itself into a good position to be considered, potentially. I don't see them losing another game this season, and I think they embarrass Clemson on Saturday. And I believe that game is at Clemson this Saturday. So I think Notre Dame continues to roll. They'll roll the rest of the season. And so sad for Clemson, but again, I'm taking Notre Dame over Clemson in the ACC. In the Big Ten, Iowa over Northwestern. This weekend, these two programs meet at Wrigley Field in Chicago for a Big Ten big-time showdown within the friendly confines of Wrigley Field. The last time Northwestern hosted an opponent at Wrigley Field, they got embarrassed pretty bad, 48-27. I was in the house. CherryPickin was in the house for that matchup. Northwestern allowed a monster rushing performance by Illinois running back Mikael LaShore. He had 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, which is a school record. I believe it still stands today, the 330 rushing yards. I don't think they played another game at Wrigley since that time in 2010, but correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest. I think a lot of what makes Northwestern special for this season is the fact that they were able to stay competitive, even with all the turmoil that surrounded the program this past summer. And, they got rid of Pat Fitzgerald. The program has performed better than I had expected. They were 1-11 last season. Right now, I believe they're 4-4. They have a real shot at bowl eligibility with 4 games remaining on its schedule. They really do. I'm not saying that they can't beat Iowa. I'm picking Iowa to beat Northwestern, but this is a game that Northwestern could very much pull off a victory. At Iowa, we know the struggles that offense has had this season, only being able to string together an average of 19.5 points per game, which ranks near the bottom of FBS this season. But by comparison, the defense for Iowa continues performing at a high level with the 6th best scoring offense nationally. For that reason, I think Iowa keeps the Hawkeyes in the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Northwestern has an upset performance over Iowa this weekend, especially if Cats quarterback Brendan Sullivan starts again. I believe he'd be making his 4th start of the season. Last week against Maryland, they got a pretty impressive victory over the Terrapins, who I believe were playing really well this season up until a few weeks ago. I mean, they've been struggling, but Sullivan looked good in that game. He went 16 for 23. He had 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 56 yards rushing. So while I'm taking Iowa this weekend, Northwestern has a real shot to potentially beat and upset the Hawkeyes at home at Wrigley Field this weekend. If you're going to that game, hit me up. Let me know if you're going to be out there. I would have loved to have gone to this game this upcoming weekend. It's kind of cool to experience the game in Wrigley Field. I'll definitely be watching. I believe it's on Peacock this weekend. So that's a big-time game in the Big Ten. I'm taking Iowa over Northwestern. And then in the Big 12, I'm taking Kansas over Iowa State. Shout out to the Kansas Jayhawks and that whole squad for getting a victory over Oklahoma last weekend with the 38-33 victory over the number 6 ranked Oklahoma. The Jayhawks snapped an 18-game losing streak to the Sooners. The victory is extra sweet because Oklahoma, as you know, is departing for the SEC after this season. Kansas beat their highest-ranked opponent since defeating Virginia Tech back in 2008 at the Orange Bowl. So I was back a young CherryPickin in college at Illinois State University. After the game, the fans rushed the field and tore down the goalposts and tossed them into Potter Lake. And that looked pretty nasty and gross. If you look on social media, you can find it. That the fans were celebrating after the victory over Oklahoma. Kansas is now bowl eligible again in back-to-back seasons, which is only the second time in school history that they've qualified for consecutive seasons. So shout out to the head coach, that whole squad over there. He really changed the culture. Head coach Lance Leopold changed the culture at Kansas, and they are a team that you have to take seriously now, week in and week out. They're not a laughingstock anymore. They're playing fun football. That's actually a cool program to watch, cool uniforms, and I've said that before on podcasts. Like, that seems like a place to be. It seems like a party. It seems like it's something special when you get victories like this. They mean something. So if you are a college football player or a young athlete trying to go to college, you got to look at Kansas. If you're out in the Midwest, like, take a look at them seriously, because they're doing some fun stuff over there. I think Kansas is clicking at the right time. They're strong in all phases of the game. On Saturday, the offense racked up 443 total yards, while its defense came up big with 3 turnovers, had 1 quarterback sack, and 4 tackle for losses. I think momentum is on Kansas' side right now, even though Iowa State has greatly improved right now. If we take a look at the first 4 games of the season, it was looking as if all hope was lost for Iowa State and head coach Matt Campbell. The Cyclones were 2-2 on those games. But if you look at the last 4 games, Iowa State has gone 3-1, which is very impressive. Iowa State has a lot to play for this weekend as well, since they'll want to punch their ticket to a bowl eligibility, so they can do that with the victory this weekend against Kansas. I think stakes will be high, energy will be high for both of these teams, but I think Kansas is too hot right now, and for that reason, I'm taking Kansas to beat Iowa State for the second year in a row on Saturday. So in the Big 12, Kansas over Iowa State. In the Pac-12, we've got a big-time matchup on paper, Washington versus USC. I'm taking Washington over the Trojans. I really should be more excited for this matchup, but frankly, I'm not. Due in part to USC's slide these last few games, really going all the way back to September 30th against Colorado, where the Trojans had a big-time lead over the Buffs, but then Colorado crept back in to pull within 7 points of winning that game. The following week, the Trojans survived 3 overtimes, 3, count them 3, 1, 2, 3, to beat Arizona. And then the next 2 weeks that followed, they got humbled big time with L's against Notre Dame, 48-20. And then they also lost to Utah. And then just this past weekend, California took the Trojans down to the very last minute, to the very wire. USC ultimately escaped with a 1-point victory. This season, USC has been more lucky than good, and I think Lincoln Riley and his Trojans get humbled yet again when Washington hosts the SoCal Kids on Saturday. Huskies quarterback Michael Penix Jr., you know the name. Washington's sensational quarterback. He currently leads all signal callers with 2,945 passing yards. Penix has thrown 24 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. He has been a Heisman favorite all season, and I think a commanding win against USC only helps to boost his profile and boost his chances of ultimately winning a Heisman Trophy for Washington, for UW. And then in the SEC, I'm taking Georgia over Missouri. I'm intrigued by this game. Georgia and Missouri are currently 1-2 in the SEC East standings if you take a look at it right now. But the Dogs are favored to win this game by 15 points, which is telling to me that the second best team in the East is still big-time underdogs to Georgia. I feel like we really haven't hyped Georgia this season. Kirby Smart and his Bulldogs have continued to put in the work week in and week out, but so much of the conversation has been about other teams in college football. It really hasn't focused on Georgia. They just do what they need to do. They do it well, and they get those dubs every week. This would be a great opportunity for Missouri to have a statement victory over Georgia this weekend, but I just don't think it happens. So much of the talk about Missouri in the SEC has been negative. If you really look at the stuff on X or Twitter, social media, people kind of dog Missouri for going to the SEC. Like, what have you done in the SEC? Is what they pose that question, that it hasn't been good enough. Missouri is irrelevant in the SEC, but they are doing a really good job this season. I believe they're 7-1 right now in college football, number 2 behind Georgia. I think if Missouri pulls off the upset, I think you got to put all that to bed. You got to dead it. Like, there's no more talk about what has Missouri done in the SEC. If they get a victory over Georgia, well, they did the unthinkable, like David versus Goliath type feat. I think if Missouri can do that, that's a statement victory for that program. But I just don't think it happens. If they were to get a win, like I said, it would be amazing. It would take a Herculean effort to pull it off. Sorry, I thought I just heard gunshots. I don't know if you heard that. Sure did sound like gunshots. But anyways, as I was saying, it'll take a Herculean effort to pull off a victory. Georgia currently boasts a number 7 scoring offense and number 7 scoring defense in all of FBS. So I don't think it's likely. And for that reason, I'm taking Georgia over Missouri. Let me run those top 5 locks down one more time for you before we get out of here. In the ACC, Notre Dame over Clemson. In the Big Ten, Iowa over Northwestern. In the Big 12, Kansas over Iowa State. In the Pac-12, Washington over USC. And in the SEC, Georgia over Missouri. Well, there we have it, my friends. That's my Week 10 preview podcast. Hope you enjoy this content. Hope you have a great week. And I hope you have fun watching college football this weekend. Week 10 action is coming at you here in a few days. Hope you stay safe and hope you stay blessed. I will talk to you all very, very soon. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Peace. It would be amazing. It would take a Herculean effort to pull it off. Sorry, I thought I just heard gunshots. I don't know if you heard that. Sure did sound like gunshots. But anyways, thank you again for tuning into my Cherry Pickin podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe to my show and drop me a rating on Apple Podcasts. All of my digital content can be found at the website CherryPickinSports.com. And if you are looking to interact with me via social media, my Twitter handle is @Cherry_Pickin. That's PICKIN. On my Twitter, you'll also find a link to my blog where I post my weekly college football predictions and analysis. I can also be reached via email at cherrypickinsports@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me regarding what you like about this podcast or about what content you'd like to hear more of on future episodes. I sincerely thank you for your support, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Take care.